Welcome all. Today in the talk show of Legends of Neurology, today we have our guest, Dr. Prakash Kotagal, who does not require much introduction, but I will still say a few words about him. He is presently Professor of Neurology at Cleveland Clinic Learners College of Lerner Medicine College and staff physician at Cleveland Clinic Pediatric Epilepsy Section. He has author of 122 articles, 17 editorials, and 41 book chapters. As well, he has editor of the book The Epilepsies, Etiologies, and Prevention. He has been trained initially at medicine, which his journey will understand here. Then he has done his pediatric at St. Louis University, then followed by his pediatric neurology training, as well as epilepsy fellowship and clinical neurophysiology fellowship at Cleveland Clinic. Then subsequently fellowship in sleep medicine at Boston Children's Hospital. In addition, presently he is president of American Indian Neurology Association, AINA, as well as he has received the Lifetime Achievement Award 2020. So we know him very well because of the most important paper on the Seizure semiology. Before we move forward, we'll start. I welcome you again, sir, and then we'll start with you as with your childhood days. So we like to know how was your childhood, what was your family background, and then how you entered from 12th into the field of medicine.
Thank you, Dr. Jagtap. It's a pleasure to join you, and I'm very excited about this opportunity to reflect on where I've been and where we are going forward, from here. So I was born in Simla, and so our family background is we are South Indian, and my father was in the central government, so he was stationed in Simla, and so that's where I grew up. So having said that, I was in Simla till about ninth standard, and then we moved to New Delhi, and then I was finishing my high school years in New Delhi. It was interesting at that time to trying to get into medical school because I was not, in comparison with my older brothers, we have four brothers, I'm number four, that I was not academically very strong. I had a lot of difficulty with math and physics and those kind of things. I needed a tutor, and even took these coaching classes to get into the competitive entrance examinations for medical school. The one that I got into right after high school was applied to two places, Christian Medical College, Vellore, and Jawaharlal Institute, Post-Medical Institute in Pondicherry. And so I ended up going to Pondicherry. So from Simla to Delhi to Pondicherry. And meanwhile, my parents moved from Delhi after my father retired to Maharashtra, and they built a house in Pune, in Kothurud, quite close to where you live and you work as well.
Yes.
So after finishing my years of medical school in Pondicherry, which was, I think, a very special time for me, and in one way, being away from home and being in an environment all by myself, it offered opportunities and challenges. After getting past the ragging or hazing, the first 6 weeks or so of medical school. But after that, we were in a great college community and have friends to this day from our medical school that we have kept in touch. So I have very fond memories of Pondicherry. I was inspired to go into neurology by my professor. At that time, we didn't have a neurology department. It was internal medicine. But Dr. Chandrasekhar, S. Chandrasekhar, he was the one who was an excellent teacher. So at that time was the beginning of my interest in neurology. So that's how I got started in Pondicherry. After finishing my internship there, then I did a house job in internal medicine at PGI Chandigarh. At that time, PGI would take twice as many candidates and only half of them would continue. So I did not make the cut at that time. So, but then next year I got into All India Institute in internal medicine. In the meantime, my green card came through. At that time, my older brothers were in the US. And so I left All India Institute and came to St. Louis for my training. So here I could only get into pediatrics. That's where the opportunity was. And then I found that pediatrics was not that different from internal medicine. And then I enjoyed the exposure to working with children and their families. So that was quite a smooth transition.
So your journey started from Simla, then Delhi, then Jipmer, and then from again to the PGI, AIMS. So most of all institutes, premier institutes, you went through, and then you landed in the USA with St. Louis University. From medicine, you shifted to pediatrics. So from general pediatrics, how you got interested further into pediatric neurology? So any incidents you want to tell us which pushed you into the other branch, pediatric neurology, rather than any other branch?
Sure. So I think that, as I mentioned, Dr. Chandrasekhar in Pondicherry, he started, my interest in neurology when I was at PGI Chandigarh doing House Officer Internal Medicine. I got to work with Professor Kurupad Radhakrishnan, who is a stalwart in neurology in epilepsy field. And he was such an excellent teacher that the interest only grew. After coming to the US, when I was at St. Louis University, my older brother Suresh Kotagal, he's a child neurologist and pediatric sleep specialist. So he also, gave me a lot of encouragement. I came to Cleveland Clinic then to do my training in child neurology with Dr. David Rothner. And then from there on, then in the neurology department at Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Hans Luters was the person who motivated me to go into epilepsy, again, because of his superb teaching skills and his wisdom and insight and his way of explaining things in a very clear manner. So that's how I became interested in child neurology, and then subsequently decided to enter the epilepsy field. One of the things that's interesting when in terms of my background, where I come from, if people ask me, sir, where are you from? Other than saying I'm from India, but it's difficult for me to say, should I say I'm from the North? I'm a South Indian, but I grew up in the North and, lived in so many different places. So that's an interesting aspect.
Yes, and you told you are the youngest of the four brothers. So right. We know Dr. Suresh Kotagal about his now is a pediatric neurologist, and he has influenced you a lot. Can you share something about him which influenced you to take pediatric neurology? Because already he was there in the pediatrics and then pediatric neurology.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things was that he leads by example, and he is very soft-spoken, an extremely hard worker, very tireless, and so even at this age, when he goes to conferences or meetings, he is attending every session from the very beginning, at 7 a.m. until the night 10 o'clock, going from one session to the other, furiously taking down notes and asking questions. Uh, and then I came to realize, at the hospital at St. Louis University, um, how much regard and respect people had for him, and what he had achieved with his just tireless work and his uh, insight and wisdom and his research accomplishments. He went on from St. Louis University to then to Mayo Clinic, um, um, and then he just last year retired from Mayo Clinic, and now he's in Tampa, Florida. He too travels to India regularly and gives lectures, and he's partnered in a number of outreach programs, volunteering, and so on. So he's been a big influence. My oldest brother, Shashikant, he's a nephrologist at Cincinnati, and my brother, who's just older than me, is in Pune, Ramesh, and he's a photographer in Kothur.
Yes. So good to know that various streams, and your elder brother is again one is a photographer. So your journey in the Cleveland Clinic started with the I think the your research on the seizure semiology, which got further evolved, and subsequently many people joined you. But again, whenever there is any talk on the seizure semiology, your name comes up first. So can you share your how the journey of the Seizure semiology evolved, and what you feel now, and what additional things are evolving further?
Yes. So one of the things that I think distinguished the program at Cleveland Clinic with Hans Luters was that he believed very strongly in keeping all the data that was acquired during the evaluation of epilepsy patients. So all the video recordings were stored and archived, which required a tremendous amount of effort and expense to do that, especially prior to digital video. So we had to record them on these they would call them U-matic tapes. They were like big tapes like that, bigger than the VHS standard that some of you may know. And then they had to be archived periodically. So we had a big library of data, both in terms of the actual EEG data as well as the video data. Eventually, the paper records by accident happened one day that they ended up in a landfill, which was a big loss. On the other hand, the video data was all kept and archived, and since subsequently has been digitized as well now. So I'd gone to Hans Luters asking for an idea for a project. So he was the one who suggested that we are doing a lot of patients who have temporal lobe epilepsy and having temporal lobectomy. So this is a group of patients. If you take only the ones who are seizure free, we know where their focus is. Look at their semiology. And so we were doing a project looking at the different symptoms in the beginning of the seizure, middle part, or end of the seizure, and doing cluster analysis to see when symptoms would appear and when they would disappear. And that required several years of work. And he actually funded that with his own departmental funds to do that project and do statistical analysis. So that's how the project got started. And so in that way, we looked at the semiology of mesial temporal lobe epilepsy, lateral temporal lobe epilepsy, frontal lobe epilepsy, and so on. So that kind of work, very few other places have done. So that was one of the unique things. And I could do it because I had a 6-month block of time between my residency and my fellowship. And he very generously, Dr. Luters and my chairman, Jack Conamy, they agreed to fund me for those 6 months. So I did 2 months of clinical service and then 4 months of research, which was invaluable. in the course of looking at those seizure videos, I came across some phenomena that I thought were interesting. And it actually was, some patients had very rapid automatisms with one hand. And I was focused on that. And it looked like that was on this side of the focus, ipsilateral. Then as I looked further, I realized that the other hand was starting to have dystonic posturing while one hand was going, so rapidly like that. So that's how I, noticed that phenomenon, and showed it to Hans Luters, and he said, "Well, this looks interesting, but let's look some more." And so we finished, the analysis of all the patients, and then we actually did grand rounds, with our in our epilepsy section, and everyone was quite impressed with the strong lateralizing value of that and how it agreed with version and where it stood in the sequence of progression, symptom progression. And then why did it not show up at the, that these patients had temporal lobe seizures? And back then, a lot of patients, nearly all of them, had subdural electrode recordings where we would cover the entire hemisphere, the temporal lobe, and even the basal mesial temporal region. But the activity was not spreading to the motor area, so we postulated it was supposed to be spreading subcortically, likely to the basal ganglia. So that was our hypothesis. So as it turned out, a few years later, we had an international symposium in Cleveland, and Dr. Berkovic from Melbourne was here. They were the pioneers in ictal SPECT. And he said, we are pleased to tell our host that their hypothesis is correct. Dystonic posturing occurs from spread to basal ganglia. So that was an interesting finding, but it came in the context of a larger project that Dr. Hans Luters initiated with me.
So it is very interesting how the journey started. And over the years now, would you like to add more anything to it, that paper, or?
So that what happened is that our fellowship at Cleveland Clinic, the fellowship program, we attracted many neurologists, both from the U.S., but also from elsewhere in the world, particularly from Europe, South America, but even from Asia. And many of the fellows that came, they were also interested in some of these projects with me. So people like Michael Chi and Andrew Bleasel, Pankaj Kiravatana, Christopher Kellinghaus, Tobias Loden-Kemper. So many of these excellent epileptologists, when they did the training, we worked on these projects together. And they brought their own ideas to it as well. And Michael G. in particular, the idea of looking at inter-observer agreement. If someone says a certain phenomenon is present, who's right? Someone else may disagree. So we did inter-observer agreement. So 3 observers, if 2 out of 3 people said a particular sign is present, yes, that is present. And we looked at things like inter-observer agreement or kappa index. We looked at positive predictive value and so on. So in that way, we looked systematically at various lateralizing signs, and then looking at the reliability, looking at the predictive value. And that work has not been done by anybody else, outside of our group. And then we went further on. We had an excellent fellow from Egypt, Sharif Alwan, who's now in Syracuse here. And we were looking at how good is seizure semiology in comparison to other tests like MRI and EEG and so on. So we analyzed data blindly. Dr. Alexopoulos, myself, and Josie Silvera, and Sharif Alwan was the only one who knew the answers, if you will. Only information he gave us was the aura. What is the aura? And then we decided the side, lateralizing left, right, and then we also decided which low frontal temporal parietal occipital. And this is how we were able to compare with MRI and PET and EEG as to how good is semiology. Again, that work too is unique, but it shows that semiology is as good as these other modalities. And a very important part of. So I think that has influenced, the field of epilepsy surgery, particularly, but even outside of that. The French group, have been involved with SEG and people, like Van Code and Patrick Chauvel and others. They have long focused on semiology and correlating it with SEG, ictal activity. Then our approach was a little bit different. We did not look at EEG. We only looked at semiology purely by itself, because there are limitations on how much you can record, which areas you can sample. So in that way, we have, I think, found some new things.
Yes. So moving forward, now you are at Cleveland Clinic for more than 30 years. So you have seen the Cleveland Clinic epilepsy program evolving. So can you elaborate on the journey of epilepsy program at Cleveland Clinic? Because now it is the most busiest program, and we have a very big team. So can you tell us about how the epilepsy program works and how the decisions are taken there?
Yeah, so Hans Luhrer started the program in 1978. And he was here from 1978 till 2007. He's now at Case Western University down the road. Most of us, of our senior faculty, have been trained by Hans Luhrer. So I think that is his legacy, his way of his approach to epilepsy classification, the semiological classification. Those are the things that he championed. He also did many other contributions with invasive EEG recording with subdural electrodes, evoke potentials, cortical stimulation, and so it just goes on and on. He's really a stalwart in the field. Then after 2004, then Dr. Imad Najm, who's now our current head of Epilepsy Center, he took over from Dr. Luhrer's. And has further advanced the program and expanded it over time. So after those earlier contributions, with EEG, surface, invasive EEG, semiology, semiological classification, the then focus moved now to stereo EEG, because we realized that some of the patients where the focus may be away from the surface, deeper within the sulci, we were not getting good localization and some surgical failure. So SEEG was introduced in 2008 with the work of Jorge Gonzalez, Martinez, Bill Bingaman, Imad Najm, and then we also joined at that time by Dr. Patrick Chauvel. He was here for several years. In helping launch stereo EEG, the first center in North America. And so that has made big contributions. Along with that, we advanced further with ictal SPECT, with MEG, and so the work that Dr. Richard Burgess and his group have done with MEG has been very much foundational in advancing the field of epilepsy surgery. Rick Burgess and Andreas Alexopoulos. Now, imaging also began to advance here. And so my colleague, Dr. Irene Wang, she's a PhD neuroimaging researcher, Steve Jones, Paul Ruggieri, who's a neuroradiologist par excellence. I think that their contributions from the imaging side have have grown tremendously and contributed to the strength of the program. So with new techniques like MR fingerprinting and voxel-based morphometry, VBM, we're finding subtle foci that are not easily seen on a standard visual review of the MRI. it was interesting. I looked at semiology with using ictal-spect, and we did some work recently with hyperkinetic seizures in looking at the path of spread from the cortex to the basal ganglia, thalamus, and upper brainstem. So these are all various developments taking place. More recently, we were joined by Dennis Lal from genetics. He's a PhD researcher, and we have a biorepository here that was started. My colleague Lara Jiham, who's adult epilepsy, but she's now the head of research in our center. And her work on outcomes, looking at seizure outcomes over time, again has given valuable information as to what happens after epilepsy surgery. And I think that has brought a lot of useful information to the forefront. So what happens is not just 1 year seizure outcome. We're looking at what happens 5, 10 years and later down the road. So in that way, I think the group has many faculty with diverse interests, and we strengthen each other. We also, in our patient management conference, which is multidisciplinary, that leads to new ideas, new questions to be solved. Now, the cases we get are getting more and more complex. So it's less common to get the straightforward, hippocampal sclerosis type of case or nice lesionectomy. More often, it is things people who have failed epilepsy surgery, people with multiple foci, multiple lesions, people with genetic problems and epilepsy. And I think that that's okay. We have many centers who are competing with us, but I think these challenging questions can promote innovation and research ideas, and we look forward to those kind of challenges.
Yes, so from non-lesional, you are going towards the non-lesional, or what we can say it is more of MR negative epilepsy. And with the help of AINA fellowship, when I was there, AINA fellowship, when I was there for 1 month, I saw maximum discussions on stereo EEG and neurostimulation. So can you tell us something more about the neurostimulation, your interest into neurostimulation?
So yes, my interest in neurostimulation started when vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, became available in 1997. And then we have found some work that was done here with Andreas Alexopoulos and myself, showing how vagus nerve stimulation, can be effective. It seems to be much more effective in the pediatric population, in children and adolescents, and maybe less effective in some of the older patients, and perhaps having to do with the chronicity of the epilepsy. Perhaps children have some plasticity that can be influenced by vagus nerve stimulation. We found very good results in children, especially pre-adolescents, was quite remarkable, and also showing that it's effective not for focal epilepsy, but generalized epilepsy. Then in the last decade, with the advent of responsive neurostimulation, or RNS, the NeuroPace system, and then later the deep brain stimulation, after the Sante trials, the stimulation of antenucleus thalamus. So the field has changed quite, in a very significant way. And so many of the adult patients that had modest benefit from VNS now, when they've gone on to RNS or DBS, they're experiencing very good results with reduction of seizures, and even in a small percentage seizure freedom as well, which was not possible before. The field of neurostimulation, I think, will continue to advance, and as people find different targets to stimulate, and develop better paradigms for doing that. So that is an exciting possibility for patients who were not thought to be good candidates for resective surgery, but neurostimulation, I think, would be an important treatment option.
So, Anna, apart from the like pediatric neurology and pediatric epilepsy, your interest is in the sleep medicine. So, how you got interested in the sleep medicine, and then you started the sleep program? So, can you tell us about the journey of sleep medicine?
So, at the Cleveland Clinic, sleep medicine was started by my late colleague Dudley Dinner, Dr. Dudley Dinner, who was an epileptologist and then also a sleep specialist as well, with many contributions in the field of evoked potentials and cortical stimulation, and then sleep. So he was adult sleep, and they needed someone to do pediatric sleep. So that's how I was asked to take that lead, and did my training at Boston Children's with Richard Ferber. So pediatric sleep, has now become a recognized entity in of itself. Coming from the epilepsy side, my interest was in looking at the relationship between sleep and epilepsy, and we've been able to, to look at that relationship as well. And in this regard, I got to collaborate with one of your colleagues in Pune, Dr. Nandan Yardi. So Dr. Yardi and we have a paper on the relationship between sleep and epilepsy that is still referenced quite a bit, because it's a nice compilation of various sources of data. So that is something that's an important relationship. I'm less active in the sleep field currently. I'm doing more of epilepsy at this time. But sleep, I think, is a very important aspect. And many people have nocturnal seizures. And I think that relationship between sleep and epilepsy can be further explored.
Okay. So now, as we know that presently you are American Indian Neurology Association president. So we'd like to know about the journey, how the journey of AINA started, and what are the aims with it started, and now what are the future projects it has. Because one of the important projects which we have now is AINA fellowship program, which is very beneficial to young neurologists. So can you tell something about it?
Yeah, so AINA, or Association of Indian Neurologists in America, was started in 1993. So it's been around for many years. We have met generally during the American Academy of Neurology. That's our main forum where we have a meeting. Typically, it's a 4-hour meeting, dinner meeting at that time. And it's also a place where neurologists who are coming to the AAN meeting would join us, and we would invite them free of charge to join us, and so that we could get to hear from them what are the developments in the neurology field taking place in India. So that has been, the focus of AINA. AINA has evolved over time. And I was not that active in AINA initially, but in 2008, Dr. Sanjay Singh, the previous AINA president, and myself, we were meeting at the American Epilepsy meeting, and we felt that we needed a place not just to meet at a restaurant and go to dinner, but actually a place where we could meet with our colleagues and have actually an agenda and a discussion of events that are important to us taking place both US and in India, to further not only networking, but collaboration in the field of education and research opportunities, volunteering, and so on. So that's how we got started. And then in 2017, Dr. A.V. Srinivasan from IAN was at the AINA meeting, and we we agreed that we needed to work more closely together in a uh, a structured framework. So actually, we then had a memorandum of understanding that was signed between the Indian Academy of Neurology and AINA. So our goals are, as you know, not only the networking, but collaborating. From the educational standpoint, we are going to have a joint symposia, and we'll have something coming up in November when we have the joint congress in New Delhi with IAN and Indian Ocean and Asian Oceanian Congress. But also, as you pointed out, in the field of education, to uh, to arrange for trainees from India who wish to spend 1 month at one of our institutions. We have several that are available opportunities here in the US in various fields. They're selected by IAN, and then AINA facilitates that for them, and they get a travel stipend as well. And I think when you were one of the first people who was able to participate in this program, and we enjoyed having you with us here in Cleveland. And it's impressive when I've gone back to Pune and seen your center, all the things that you have put into practice. That is very gratifying for us. With COVID, things came to a halt, and we are still waiting to find out when we can again start receiving trainees from India. So the commitment is there from AINA and also from IAN to make this happen, and we're excited about restarting this program.
I'm very sure that this is very good initiative, and it has very good fruits it is going to bear, because my experience was very good at Cleveland Clinic, and that 1 month give us an exposure as well as a new avenues to explore further. So as we move forward, beyond neurology, what are your other areas of interest? Still, are you watching Hindi movies, Hindi songs?
Yeah, so, well, for many years. And so the interesting thing is that, I'm married to an American. My wife is Laura. And so although we would go back and, family-wise, we maintained all family ties and travel to India and so on, and observe both, Hindu festivals and, Christian festivals and so on. But my contact with India was more limited in the earlier years. And then as my parents got older, I started coming to India more regularly. And then in the course of that, I realized that, I knew some people, some colleagues, from meeting them at conferences, people like Dr. Nandan Yardi and Roop Gurshani and so on. So I got to meet people, and then I realized that when I came to visit my family, that when I met with colleagues, we developed friendships, and so that was a very gratifying thing for me to become involved with the neurology community in India and develop friendships along the way. The question you were asking about, can you repeat the question about I think you had a different question there.
Same thing. And still, are you watching Hindi movies?
Yeah. So thank you. So about that, the place where I usually am watching the Hindi movies are on the long flights to India. When I'm flying, 18 hours, so that is the opportunity to binge watch
Okay.
Hindi movies one after the other. The other way I access Hindi music now is through Pandora, which is amazing, because the good thing is that you don't select only one or two songs that but it exposes you. It says, what about this song? Do you like this one or that? So it's an endorsement for Pandora, I suppose. But so that is the way I've accessed that. We have cultural events that take place here in Cleveland. So we have actually a very prominent festival, Tyagaraja Festival, that takes place annually at Cleveland State University, and it's the best classical music, classical dance program in the U.S. It takes place in Cleveland, usually in the early spring, like March, April is usually when it happens. So we've gone to cultural events here as well.
And what about the food? Do you like cooking? And still you are eating like you are eating South Indian food, or you are now completely eating American food?
Yeah, so the food wise, it's been a transition, and um, you know, before I got married, I was eating things from like frozen meals, what they call TV dinners, as they would call them, which was not very satisfying. It was bland Western food. So I decided that I would learn to cook. So I got a cookbook. It's by Julie Sani, Classical Indian Cooking. And so I taught myself how to make Indian food. And if you follow the instructions, you cannot go wrong. So I started that way, and then started to entertain. So I entertained my fellow residents. Um, and then, so these days, in our household, wife makes both Western food as well as Indian food. She cooks well, and then I get to cook when I'm not on hospital service or call. I enjoy cooking as well. So
And
it's exciting to find new ways to enjoy food. Then when I would come home to visit my parents in Pune, I would very closely watch what my mother was doing, and I would ask, okay, how do you do this? And she could not like write things down for me. She said, no, just watch. It's like, so
yeah.
that's how I would watch and even take down a few notes. But no, I think that one of the amazing things about rewards of coming to India is the food. I think that we have good restaurants in the U.S. also, but there's nothing comparing to what you get in India. From these simple family style restaurants to the ones in the five-star hotels. The food, the service, the hospitality is just outstanding. So when I come to India, tendency to binge and gain a few pounds.
Yes. So it is very interesting. So how you learn cooking and now you enjoy the cooking also, and how you keep yourself so fit, because the Cleveland Clinic schedule is very hectic, and it nearly starts, some meetings start at 7:30 or 7 a.m. So I know you love walking, but how you keep yourself so much fit?
I think it's. I mean, I've always had a more or less normal weight. Um, because we are in our family, I think genetically, we are all on the small side. But physical activity, I think, is very important, because now I have type 2 diabetes. So it's a motivation for me to walk. So I take the stairs when I can. Our office on the 5th floor, so I'll climb 5 flights of steps. In the evening, I walk with my dog. It's a big Labrador dog, so they need a lot of exercise. And the good thing is that they are very cheerful about going in any kind of weather, even if it's raining or cold or icy. We can put spikes on our shoes, so we don't slip on ice and so on. And if you go outside, it's a stress reducer. I think that when you walk, it outside, it reduces your stress. You get to meet your neighbors, um, and I think that that's a good activity. Now I don't do major weight lifting or things like that. I'm not doing that yet, but I probably will start at some point. But it's important that I think that physical activity helps manage my blood sugar um, quite well.
Because it is important, and we have now Indian Academy of Neurology running group, so there are many people who walks a lot, and then
Yeah,
run some runs like more than there is a challenge what we call, that is 1,000 kilometers per year. So that is
yeah.
also to keep everybody fit and our brain active. So
Yeah, so I'm actually wearing this little disc-like thing which monitors glucose. Okay, and so it's in my arm, and I just scan it, and then it will display what my blood sugar is.
Yeah, yeah.
And it tells me that if I ate something that, like I had too much bread or pasta or something, it'll shoot up. And so it gives you some reinforcement. So now I know what I should eat, what I should not eat, limit, small amounts, spaced out. So these are things that I think, these wearable technologies, I think they are going to influence our lives. And I think it'll probably in the epilepsy field too, people are now wearing some of these watches and things like that, to monitor their seizures or alert somebody. So I think technology is helping us in many ways.
So it is very interesting to know about the fitness and diet. And now moving towards the end of our talk show, will you like to come back to India and practice in India?
That's a good question. I think that I had thought when I first came that I could train and then come back and work in India. And I think that if my spouse was Indian, of Indian birth, that would, that might be a consideration. I don't think that's likely now because she's from the US and my children have grown up in the US, so it would be leaving them to come to India. So I don't think I would be moving to India or to practice, but I will maintain my ties to India because I have a brother and his family in Pune to visit them, and I have other, extended family members in Bangalore and Hyderabad. So I would come to see them. My ancestral village of Kotagal is actually near Bangalore in Mysore, Mysore or Karnataka state. So now I've actually been to it, which is an interesting place to visit. So those ties will be there, and so not to practice in India so much, but I think to come for volunteering, like in camps, for instance. So we are interested in doing those kind of activities and um, um, conferences and CME, continuing education programs and things like that. I think so. That's what I look forward to doing.
Yes, it is always pleasure to listen to your talks and to meet you and interact with you. And I was very lucky to I got mentorship by you for at least 1 month in the Cleveland clinic and got the experience. And again, I'm on the behalf of AINA, I thank you for agreeing to talk and share your thoughts and share your journey with us. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to join you and share these conversations. Thank you.